Next up, we have Andromeda Metals, ASX code ADN, market cap of $233 million. We welcome back the Managing Director, James Marsh. The company's vision is to lead the world in the sustainable supply of superior quality industrial minerals and the advancement of nanotechnologies. James, nice to see you. Just got off a plane. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, it was a bit of a mad rush to get here. I made it, but my luggage didn't for the fourth time in a row. So the joys of travel. And thanks for that introduction. And welcome to Andromeda. So this presentation was released in full last week, and we gave it to the broker community. And today's the goal of today is to give the same message and same chance to go through it with the retail community. So next slide, please. Disclaimer, and this is our corporate snapshot. So main takeaways here to focus on, you mentioned our market cap. An interesting number there is we have almost 15,000 shareholders there now, so a very large number of shareholders for the size of company. We are sitting on a very healthy bank balance at the moment, over 30 million and zero debt. Next, please. So what is Andromeda? So as you heard there, we aspire to be a leading producer of top quality industrial minerals and the downstream nanotechnologies associated with those. And our strategy based around that, we have three important pillars of strategy there. We have industrial mineral strategy, which is our growth area. That's focused around the industrial mineral itself, extraction, refining, and sale of that into very mature established markets around the world. We also have some metal assets, which are gold and copper, which we are farming. We are looking to capitalize those and return the value to shareholders from them. And very importantly, we have our nanotechnology, which is our real high growth area. This is where we're using our unique mineral to establish some nanotechnologies in some high growth valuable areas. Next slide, please. So a critical question to shareholders is why Andromeda? Why should you invest in Andromeda? And if you have already invested, why should you stay invested? So there's some key points here to who we are and what we're doing and what we aim to do. So first of all, we are in a tier 1 mining jurisdiction in the world. This is South Australia is now classified in the top 10 in the world. So we're right up there, and that makes us a very interesting proposition for many other people in the world now who are suffering from all sorts of issues that you're probably well aware of. So being where we are with the infrastructure we have, and the stable government structure makes us a very attractive proposition. We have very large portfolio of tenements, over 8,000 square kilometers now. That includes our kaolin and non-kaolin assets. We have a very nice mineral resource of kaolin. Now, this is a very special resource. We have a total of well over 110 million tons at the moment, which we're expanding as we speak. But in amongst that, we have our ore reserve, which is very importantly, is 15 million tons of what you could describe as amongst the, in a car scenario, would be the Ferrari of kaolin reserves here. Now we're surrounded by Holdens and Fords, but we have the real Ferrari here. This is a very special resource of a real high value, high quality kaolin. Very experienced team, which we're growing all the time, leading us through into production. We have a mining lease, which we got granted end of last year. And then we also released our DFS, our definitive feasibility study. So we're de-risking the project significantly. We've got 2 binding offtakes in place. We're now just finalizing a remainder of offtakes for our stage 1 production. And also we have these 2 big high growth areas, which we are developing at the moment, which is based around high purity Lumina, and also our nanotechnologies, which I'll tell you more about. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about the resource. I mentioned we had a special resource. We have very large, extensive tenements around the Eyre Peninsula of South Australia. This represents about over 4,000 kilometers here, square kilometers of tenements. We have the Great Whites, which is our #1 project, our main focus at the moment, which is what we aim to get into production first. But close by that, we also have Hammerhead, Tiger, Bronze Whaler, which all have JORC resources right now. And in the grey zones there, you'll see the Eyre Kaolin joint venture. So that one is some new area we picked up. We've just drilled that. We've got samples in for analysis right now. We drilled about 1,000 meters, which doesn't sound much in terms of gold drilling, perhaps, but when you're talking about our material, which is very shallow, very close to the surface, very easy to drill, that's a lot of holes, and that will give us some very good information on potentially what could be some very, very significant new resources coming through there. And we also have a long history of exploration. Company was previously known as Adelaide Resources. So we have now 29 years of history in the area and very successful exploration activities. Next slide, please. So what are our products? These are products that we're planning to produce from the Great White Project. These are going to be first out of the plant. And number one there is what we call our KCM. This is a semi-refined, but still very high quality kaolin. And this is something that can be used directly in ceramics. So this is a very mature, established market. We have a very unusual form of kaolin called halloysite kaolin, which is really perfect for ceramic use. And this is very high quality ceramics. This material, the KCM90, can be used directly in ceramics. It can be used to blend it in with other products, and it can be further refined to make a true premium product. So our stage one, we're looking at offtakes for that right now. Demand is high. We're in a very good spot at the moment in terms of history, because the resources of this around the world have diminished quite significantly. And even recently, one of the world's biggest producers was Ukraine, which has now completely disappeared. And alongside that, we're sitting right next to the big growth area in the world. So more than half the world's demand is in Asia Pacific. And a lot of that was supplied out of Europe until recently. So we're in a very good spot at the moment. So our KCM90 is certainly of great interest to a lot of people there. We also have a concrete product we developed. This is in our resource. The material was some very interesting chemistry. It's very reactive in concrete as a modifier to the rheology. So it means that it helps the concrete flow, be able to be pumped, placed, finished, and so on. And also, a very small addition rate of this material will allow lots of interesting property improvements, along with cost savings and also carbon footprint reduction. So this is an interesting product in concrete, which is a huge potential market around the whole world. And we have just recently signed a letter of intent with the world's biggest additives distributor, IMCD. So we're now working on converting that to a binding offtake. They want exclusivity for the whole Asia Pacific, which will be a huge market opportunity for us. That material is high value and very easy to process, and it's patented by us, and it's also passed all the concrete standards already for use. Number three there, we've got our CRM, which is our fully refined product for ceramics. We have a binding offtake in Japan there for 5,000 tons of that at a very high price, probably about double the normal price for a kaolin product. And then last off one there, we have our paint product. We have an even bigger binding offtake for that. This is 70,000 tons a year, which is a huge offtake. And this is, again, more than double the value of normal kaolin. So we have some very interesting high value kaolins here, which are quite unique in the world of kaolins. Next slide, please. A bit more about the project, Great White Kaolin Project, our number one focus. There's a lot of activity going on here. We're very busy at the moment. We're doing activities in probably 5 areas there. We've got stakeholder engagement is going through to the final stages before we start operation. Environmental impact studies. So we're just completing our modeling on groundwater. This area where we're mining is got no real issues there. So that should be just an easy process to go through to finish off the pepper, which is our final approvals before we can break ground. So submission of that is scheduled for early next month. And then it's just down to the government finishing off that, ticking off our plan, which we'll be submitting. And land access, so we have an in-principle agreement there, and we're just moving that forward now to just improve our relationships in the area and make sure that that's all ticked off properly. Final thing to mention there is our pilot plant. We have a $1 million pilot plant at the moment, which we are upgrading. The intention is that we will be producing, at the moment we produce tens of kilos out of this plant, or hundreds of kilos, I should say. The intention is to upgrade that to produce tens of tons. So that will enable us to have a seamless transition into full supply to customers once the main plant gets operating. Next slide, please. So just a quick picture to show you what the plant will look like. This is what the stage 4 the plant will look like. So there's no rocket science involved here. This is conventional technology. It's been around for decades, just gravitational separation. So what we're doing basically is removing the sand from the product. It comes out of the ground at about 50% sand and 50% halloysite kaolin. So we desand it, take out some other minor impurities, and we end up with the product. The sand goes back in the hole, and it's rehabbed progressively. Very small footprint, very shallow, very easy to mine. No nasty chemicals, no tailings dams. So this makes it a very low impact project. Next slide, please. So it's all about operational readiness now. So we are now moving forward as quickly as possible into operation. So we're ticking off these main boxes here: land access, suppliers, site establishment, agreements, and I can't see the ones behind my photograph there, which is logistics. So that last one's important because about half of our cost is logistics. Now we're very lucky. Our material's worth at least double the normal price in the market, so we can cope with logistic costs, but they still are 50% of our total costing. So we're working on some new opportunities there, and we're working on improving those. Next slide, please. We've got a business development team set up now, and they've been very busy behind the scenes developing this framework. Now, this is just the top layer of a many-layered system we've got in place, and this is now being used to progress all of our new opportunities. We have got a number of those in nanotechnology and HPA and some other areas that are not quite public yet. And all of those projects are being put through this very systematic approach to make sure that we do things to a very professional level. Next slide, please. And this slide just tells you a bit more about our high purity Lumina project. This is something that's quite popular in Australia. There's a number of companies working on this topic at the moment. We've been working this for several years ourselves, and we've done a lot of work. We haven't said a great deal about it, but last week we filed a patent, which is a very interesting patent. So we've been working on a novel approach to this. We believe we found a way to get from our kaolin, which is very high purity feed for this process, to a high purity alumina, which is recognised as a critical battery mineral by the Australian government. And you'll see there it's got some very high growth predictions in some areas, which not surprisingly is it's going into things like lithium-ion batteries, smartphone glass, and LED lights. So the patent we filed there is something that we're now progressing. We are proving that process up. We're making 0.5 ton of our kaolin feed at the moment, which will be processed through using our new flow sheet. That will prove this process up. We've engaged some experts, some world experts, to help us take us through this, not just in the development, the metallurgy, the scaling, commercialization, but also in the market analysis. So a lot of work going on there. And probably worth mentioning that our process also in the patent, we've also included the ability to make smelter-grade alumina from kaolin, which is also another major breakthrough. Next slide, please. So nanotechnologies, we have a number of projects here. We've got around about 14 projects in this area, which we're funding through our partner, which is a Global Innovation Centre for Nanotechnology at Newcastle University. Now, these projects are exciting areas. We cover energy, environment, health, and agriculture. And it's all based around the ability to use our natural nanotubes and use the structure we have there to create these nanostructures, which are potentially very high value. And probably is worth pointing out there that our carbon capture is probably our lead project there. And we have a plant that was built, designed, engineered in India and shipped over. It got delayed quite badly due to COVID, but it is actually here now. And we're now progressing that through to getting it into situ and into operation. And next slide, please. So as I mentioned, a lot of work going on in the background. We're working in all these areas, a lot going on. We're putting in the organizational structure together to start operations. We've got an enterprise resource planning system put in place. We're just bringing a new management operating system in, and all sorts of very intensive work activities there. And that shows what's going on behind the scenes. We can't talk much about that publicly because it's not material, but it is very important to get us into operations as quickly as possible. Next slide, please. Getting towards the end now. So this is the end. what we've done in the last 12 months, we've achieved a lot of things in a very difficult situation with the world environment as it's been, but we've got a mining lease. We completed acquisition of our joint venture partner. We also got 100% of a nanotechnology company. We raised $45 million. We got the DFS finished and released. We scoped the works and designed the plant. We've built a very strong, expert, dedicated team, and we've got the land access agreement reached in principle. So a lot of things ticked off there. And moving forward, we've now got a few things to do. Now, there's nothing here going to stop us. It's a case of when, not if here. And we're going to move through those actions there, which are the agreements, finish the binding offtakes, finish the pilot plant upgrade, get the peppered in and approved, optimize logistics, build relationships with the contractors and suppliers, and then break ground as soon as possible. Next slide, please. And that completes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Good to see you back. You've been busy. We can see that. A few questions here on the pilot plant. Can you give us a little bit more kind of update details on how it's progressing?
This is the pilot plant or the carbon capture plant?
Well, there's questions on the pilot plant, and there's also questions on the carbon capture plant.
Okay, yeah. So just differentiate those two. So the pilot plant, yeah, this is a $1 million pilot plant we have. We've been using it extensively over the last few years to prove up our metallurgical process flow sheet. It's using equipment that's almost identical to what will be used in a full-scale plant. So we can be very assured that the scale up here is going to be a very straightforward process. Now, at the moment, we've been producing hundreds of kilos, sort of maximum of our materials for testing, but we now want to ramp that up to be able to produce container loads or truck loads for customers. We've got customers now who we're discussing binding offtakes with, and who've already signed binding offtakes, who would like tens of tons of product, and they would like those to go through their plants right now. So when we start producing the full amount next year, hopefully end of next year, then that'll be a seamless transition to the full amount. But we're also installing a large-scale centrifuge that we've been working on for a while, and the intention of this plant is to be able to make a high-purity alloysite. If we can get the high-purity alloysite purified there from our feed material, then we've got a product there that's worth up to about $5,000 a ton. So we've been working on that behind the scenes for a long time, but now we're inching closer and closer to getting that done with our new plant.
And from a geopolitical perspective, the kind of the terrible situation in Ukraine's opened up an opportunity, as they're a large producer. But what's that mean for the Chinese market, the ceramic market there? Is there still potential there?
Yeah, there is. There was a surprisingly large amount of European kaolin goes into China, and a lot of that comes from not just Ukraine, but the major suppliers out of Russia and Belarus as well. So the whole of that area is a big supplier of kaolin. Now that's all been just completely chopped out of the supply chain. So that has opened up a big gap. But probably more significant to us is the fact that the Chinese mines that were producing this material now, the three major ones there, there's two have run out of material. One has been shut down by government environmental teams. So the Chinese have lost their domestic supply as well as what was being imported. And the other major importer into China was from America. And there's a lot of issues there with the battle they're having on their tariff situation and so on. So it's opened up a great opportunity for us because we're geographically in the right spot for that. And very importantly, we have alloysite kaolin, which they don't have in Europe. They don't have in America. They had a bit in China, and that's all gone. So now the Chinese are watching us very closely, and they would buy all of our raw ore right now if they could. But we don't want to do that. Now we're all about getting the maximum value from every ton out of the ground. So we're going to work very hard to get the maximum value from every ton and make sure that we get full return for our shareholders.
And James, there's quite a few questions here on offtake agreements. How are these discussions going? What's the interest like? Where's it coming from? Can we expect any news or updates in the future?
Yeah, certainly some good news will be coming through on that. Now, I've had a recent trip to Vietnam. I haven't been to Japan, despite rumours, but I have been to Vietnam recently, and yeah, those people said, well, the exact words, "This is beautiful material." So we're now just going through the sort of the fine print of working through those offtake agreements, how much they will take, what the price will be. Also, we're talking to customers in 6 other countries throughout Asia. It's not just China, not just Japan. We've got another half dozen countries there we're talking to, and we're moving those through to binding offtakes. We're working very hard to make sure we get the optimum spread of offtakes here at the maximum price. We could sell the whole lot into China, and there's no doubt about that, but we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we spread the risk and we get the maximum value. And I've got no doubt that we're going to get some long-term relationships built here with people who they don't want material for 1, 2, 3 years. They want material for decades, and they see us as being someone that can supply very consistent, high-quality material for multi-generational business.
And James, can you tell us a little bit more about the Lumina process and particularly the Lumina opportunity? Is this something that's just eventuated over recent times? We spent a long time working on it. Now, I first started making high purity alumina. I was involved with it 30 years ago, back when I worked in Europe, and I was a young chemist on kaolin products. So it's something I've had a lot of contact with. Now, when I joined Andromeda, we started doing work on using some conventional flow sheet designs, but we identified a number of issues there that we believe will be a real challenge to scaling up any process. So we spent a long time working around that, engaged the right experts. We believe we've now found a way around those potential trip hazards. We found a process that should be much lower cost, much easier, much lower risk, but we can also, from our kaolin feedstock, we can also make a smelter grade alumina, that's like the holy grail of the aluminium industry. So we're very excited about that, and we're now looking at how we progress that opportunity on the smelter grade, along with also proving up the final stages of the high purity alumina before we move that to full feasibility.